Shalom, friends. I would like to welcome you, our audience all over the world, from 4 different time zones for this very special gathering. First of all, I would like to thank the Jewish News who initiated this project, the Jerusalem Post, and the Forward for this very special collaboration. We Jewish people have this historical tendency to be divided and dissentious, but at times of peril, we stick together, and this is such a time. Before we start, I would like to say something on a personal note. One of the most hurtful experiences I have found during this past 10 devastating weeks, besides the horrors and the sorrows of the actual terrorist acts, was the feeling of betrayal by those who I thought were my friends. During the past years, many of my colleagues around the world became friends of mine. We kept in touch. After October 7th, many of them have kept silent. Their silence was deafening. Others did talk to me during that dreadful first week. They even condoned Hamas acts and then added but. This word but was a pretext to some nasty lecture which actually justified the worst thing that my country has ever gone through. In these times of crisis, you find out who your real friends are, and I was astonished to find out how few they were and how many of them turned their back on me on one day and actually did not see me as their friend Neta, but as some Israeli villain. I think that sadly this is one of the most hurtful lessons of October 7th. Due to this silence, I knew that I must sound my voice, and due to the many lies and distortions, I felt that I must tell the truth. Today, we will try to put some light to this great darkness. After all, we're on the 8th day of Hanukkah. We will be hearing tonight from people who are fighting this darkness every day. We will be talking to Eylon Levy, a spokesman for the Israeli government, and to Itai Reicher, a writer for Israel's leading comedy and satire show Eretz Nehederet. Our 3 editors, Tzvika Klein, Richard Ferrer, and Jody Rudoran, will be speaking to justinacohen, editor of the Jewish News, about the challenges reporting this past week's events in a hostile environment. Please stay with us to the end and join me and the other guests in lighting the full 8 candles of Hanukkah. Many of you around the world have already registered to take part in the lighting on screen. Please write your names and where you're joining us from. Good evening, Eylon. 10 weeks ago, hi, good evening.
Hello, good evening. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. So, first, I would like to introduce you. Eylon Levy is a former foreign media advisor to President Yitzhak Herzog. Nowadays, he's a spokesman for the Israeli government and one of the most eloquent voices presenting Israel's cause in the world. Good evening.
Good evening.
So 10 years ago, you were quote unquote drafted. And since then, you've given nonstop interviews to the media.
10 weeks, not years. The war feels like it's gone on forever.
Oh my
but
God,
not
it does feel like 10 years ago.
It does feel like 10 years.
It was a Freudian slip, but it was, 10 weeks ago. Could you, how is it to be out there? Could you share it with us, please?
It is surreal. We find ourselves being the faces of what is the #1 news story in the world, and for much of the last 10 weeks, the only news story in the world. The whole world was shocked and horrified and appalled by the Hamas atrocities of October 7th and has been watching very closely, very, very closely, although in some cases not closely enough to certain details, and it's our job to shine a light on those details, to the story of the war that we have been fighting since, in response to the October 7th massacre and in response to Hamas's threat to perpetrate more October 7th massacres. And I'm part of a team here together with everyone in the UK will be familiar with, the legendary Ambassador Mark Regev, former ambassador to the United Kingdom, trying to do as many interviews as possible, a press conference every day, trying to do every TV station, every radio, every podcast that will take us so that we can tell Israel's story and we can remind the world why we are fighting this war, a war we didn't want, a war we didn't start, a war we didn't even expect, but a war that we have no choice but to fight and to win. and that we too want to end this war. We all want this war to be over. We want the hostages home. We want our friends who are in reserves to come home as well. But we need this war to end with the end of Hamas, because anything short of that is going to condemn us to another round of fighting in a few months or years' time, because Hamas's genocidal ambitions against our people have not changed. And we cannot leave this war with Hamas free and emboldened to attack our people ever again.
Was there anything especially surprising about the attitude that you've encountered? I will just mention one specific incident that we all remember and went viral. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Could you be...
That also feels like it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. So...
Have there been any surprising moments? Look, I've had my fair share of very strange questions where you clutch your hair and think, how on earth are we looking at the same story? And someone is fitting those facts into that story in their head. The famous moment with Kay Burley, of course, when she asked whether the fact that Israel was willing to release 3 violent prisoners for every 1 hostage meant we undervalued Palestinian lives. There was also the interview when I was asked, after we showed CCTV footage of hostages being abducted into the Shifa hospital, do we have CCTV footage of medical treatment they received there? And in one interview, when I told the interviewer that we're hearing voices from Palestinians in Gaza speaking out against the Hamas regime as its control on power crumbles, being told that we're not giving them a chance to topple the Hamas regime because we haven't stopped bombing Gaza. And I have to explain, of course, that if they haven't toppled the Hamas regime over the last 16 years, then that is exactly what Israel is going to do now for our sake and for the sake of on new opportunities for Palestinians who realize that terrorism is a dead end. So there's definitely a challenge with Hasbara, which is not only to give the facts and the stories and the figures that people are overlooking, but to try to change the stories, the very twisted stories that some people have in their heads.
But do you feel you're managing to convey their opinions, to convey what you think? I mean, to persuade anyone, or is it falling on oznaim arelot? I mean,
no, we're cutting through, and our challenge is actually very different from previous conflicts, because in previous conflicts, when around the world maybe it wasn't clear how the war started or why we were fighting or what the goal is, there was a challenge to try to explain that. And our job now is actually to remind everyone of what they already know and of what they already said on October 7th when this massacre happened. President Obama said on October 7th, the United States must stand by Israel as it dismantles Hamas. And our job now is to keep reminding people about the stories of the atrocities of October 7th. I hate it when people say, these atrocities give Israel legitimacy for a military campaign, as if we want this war and need an excuse for it. No, it is the reason that this war is happening in the first place, because it was the opening shot of this war. And when you have the prime ministers of Australia, Canada, and New Zealand putting out a press release calling for an immediate ceasefire, but in the same breath saying that Hamas must lay down its arms and there can be no future for Hamas to govern Gaza, it's our job to remind them of the inconsistencies there and the basic moral truth and moment of moral clarity of this war. And to say, we know you're coming under political pressure. We know that the images are making it very difficult to stand by us and do what you know in your heart of hearts is right. But we need to hold them by the hand and remind them of what they know and shine that light on what they already know to be true. And that's why the Hasbara war this time is different. It's different from previous occasions.
Yeah. I would love to continue talking to you, but we have a few questions from our viewers. One is from Susie Weitzman.
Mm-hmm.
Writing, I'm the owner of a specialist travel company based in Israel, working with incoming groups and individuals. My clients ask, when will it be safe for us to go back to Israel? We have lost trust in the security and intelligence service. How do we regain the trust and confidence of the tourist industry that is safe for them to return to Israel?
At the moment, we are fighting a war. There is no nice way to put it. We are fighting a war. At any moment, there can be a missile siren here in Tel Aviv, and we will have a minute and a half to run for shelter. The number of rockets has gone down dramatically as a result of us pushing Hamas out of Gaza City and capturing so many of their weapons. But we are in a war. We are in a state of emergency at the moment. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not safe to visit. People are visiting, and I've spoken to many solidarity delegations that have been here in Israel. They're coming, and people who want to volunteer and show solidarity. And I think that anyone who wants to come now and volunteer to help keep this country ticking, that is just a supreme manifestation of Jewish mutual responsibility at this moment. And I would encourage everyone who can to come and chip into this effort, because this moment, October 7, has reminded us all around the Jewish world, that we're all in the same boat, that you pinch one hand and the other hand feels it, and that the line between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, it's BS. It doesn't exist. The people who are attacking us here are linked directly to the people who are tearing down posters of little Jewish babies around London, and we're all in the same boat. So anyone who wants to come and express solidarity and bear witness and volunteer, I definitely encourage that. And hopefully we will wrap up this war and restore normalcy. But I'll tell you what some soldiers told me the other day. I went down to Kfar Aza to see for myself the ruins of the massacre. And on the way back, we dropped off our protective equipment, the helmet and the gear, with the soldiers. And I told them, I hope this war is over soon and you can all go back to your families. And they gave me a slap on the wrist and they said, no, not soon. When it is over. This war will be over when it is over, because everyone here is so united with that understanding that the war has to end with the end of Hamas, because otherwise those soldiers can't go home to their children and tell them it's safe. So we're all in this together, and anyone who wants to come here and be part of it as well, we welcome you.
Another question is from Vivi in London. She's asking, I really want to know, why do we continue to be part of the UN? I've been asking the question for 20 minutes and still years. She's been asking this question for 20 years and still don't have a satisfactory answer. Do you believe the UN is reformable?
The United Nations is the club of every sovereign member state in the world. And so we have to be there for all its problems, because it is in many ways the world's assembly. It has serious problems. In this war, many of its officials and agencies have gone full out running propaganda for Hamas. They are projecting all sorts of lies onto Israel, genuine lies, to cover up for the fact that they have been covering up for Hamas. And the UN is, after all, a reflection of the countries that comprise it. Most countries in the world, or many countries at least, have a certain hostility towards Israel, and the UN reflects that. Unfortunately, the world isn't filled with 50 Jewish states. It would be a very different place if it were. But this is the world that we are living in, and part of the Zionist vision and Zionist dream is that we will be a full, upstanding, sovereign member of the family of nations. And that's why it's important that we fight our corner and speak our truth and build diplomatic relations and alliances, even when the going gets tough, because no man is an island, no country is an island. Elon Musk was here last week, but we don't have an option to relocate with him to planet Mars just yet. We're here on planet Earth. We're part of the family of nations, and we have to insist on our rightful place in that family.
Okay, next questions come from Michaela Sukachi. The Israeli ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Khotabeli, has said that there can't be a two-state solution. Did the Israeli government stance change on this?
Prime Minister Netanyahu's position has been clear for very many years. We think that the Palestinians should have all the powers they need to govern themselves, and none of the powers to threaten Israel. Look, October 7th was a moment that has changed everything. And if October 7th hasn't changed how you see the world, how you see the conflict, how you understand it, then you need to think things through again. I think one of the lessons that many Israelis will be drawing from October 7th, and it is still very early, everything is going to change. One of the lessons is that territorial withdrawals are extremely dangerous. And even the worst, most apocalyptic scenarios about what would happen following an Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, when people spoke about missiles from Gaza, no one imagined death squads invading and burning, beheading, torturing, raping, and mutilating 1,200 Israelis and abducting 250 into the Gaza Strip. So many Israelis will be asking now, you are asking us to withdraw from territory when we know that this is the potential risk. And when we just saw a poll now saying that I think it's 82% of West Bank Palestinians think that the October 7 atrocities were the correct decision by Hamas, despite everything that has happened since in Gaza. So this is an earthquake moment that requires us to rethink a lot of things about Israel's security, about its diplomatic relations. But the Prime Minister's policy has been clear and consistent for many years. We don't want to govern the Palestinians. We want them to have all the powers to govern their lives, but we cannot give them any of the powers to threaten us and to threaten our people when we understand what the stakes of renouncing control over our own security would be. We know what the stakes are now.
Next questions come from Nimat Sandia. He's asking, does Israel know how many hostages are held by Hamas are still alive, and when can we expect another hostage prisoner swap?
Hamas is still holding 135 hostages since October 7. Of those, 20 have been murdered in captivity. There were more who were murdered in captivity and we recovered their bodies, but there are 20 bodies Hamas is holding hostage as part of the 135. Now, we had a framework in place to get at least all the women and children out. And at the moment, I think there are 19 women and 2 children, the Bibas children, who have become iconic of Hamas's crimes against humanity on October 7th. We had a framework in place to have 1 day of a pause in the fighting for every 10 hostages who were released. We gave 3 violent criminals in exchange for each hostage, as Mrs. Burley reminded us. And we were hoping that that would continue. Unfortunately, just as Hamas started this war on October 7th, it restarted this war on December 1st when it violated the terms of the pause, stopped releasing all the women and children, and decided to resume rocket fire at Israel. Now, we're committed to the pledge that there will be no one left behind. We are fighting to put pressure on Hamas to release the women and the men, the young and the old, the civilians and the soldiers. And there are so many Israelis right now who are wearing this dog tag like I'm wearing now that says, bring them home now. And I don't know if you've had them distributed in the UK, but if you do, I really recommend that you wear them as well. You hold it by your heart and remember why we're fighting. It says here in Hebrew, Halev shelanu shavui be'aza. Our hearts are still trapped in Gaza. So we're putting more military pressure on Hamas. That strategy has been vindicated, and we want to see all of them released immediately and unconditionally. And until then, they must be given access to the Red Cross. And in as much as there is a possibility to have a temporary pause in order to get hostages out, we will of course welcome that, because getting our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters home is a central goal of this war.
Last questions. A question is from Mark Adler. He's asking, can you comment on the provenance, IDF or otherwise, of videos recently circulated of armed Hamas terrorists hijacking and riding on the tops of trucks carrying humanitarian aid, and the degree to which the IDF is able to take out the terrorists in transit, block the trucks' continued journey, and or track their ultimate destinations for potential identifications of terrorists and or hostages holdouts?
You know, this is really shocking. Not only Hamas stealing aid, not only international silence about that, but the way that many in the international community are running full-on propaganda for Hamas in order to deflect that. Just earlier, I saw the chief legal officer of the Red Cross in an interview to the New York Times accusing Israel of deliberately starving the civilian population and not allowing fuel, water, food, or medicines into Gaza. Now, that is a lie. There are no restrictions, zero restrictions on Israel's side to the entry of humanitarian necessities. We have excess capacity to inspect the trucks. The problem is the backlog at the Rafah crossing and the fact that the UN in Gaza is not managing to distribute the aid as quickly as Israel is inspecting it. And the Red Cross now seems to be doing everything to try to deny that Hamas is stealing aid and fighting out of hospitals. And part of our job is to continue shining a light on that and calling them to account for their hypocrisy and their complicity with Hamas's crimes. We want to see as much aid as possible going to the civilians in Gaza who need it, while making sure that Hamas cannot steal it. That's why we've been allowing in humanitarian necessities, and we've been scanning those trucks to make sure that Hamas isn't trying to smuggle weapons into the Gaza Strip. And we've all seen those images of Hamas looting aid, and it's important that international agencies shine a spotlight on that and point the finger where it needs to be pointed. That this is a war that Hamas launched, and this is a humanitarian crisis that Hamas is manufacturing and deliberately aggravating to keep its own fighters well-fed and well-stocked at the expense of the civilians in Gaza. And the address for that suffering is Hamas. It is not us, and the world needs to hold it to account.
Thank you very much, Eylon.
Thank you very much. To you, to everyone watching, and the whole of the wonderful British Jewish community. Happy Hanukkah, and let's hope for brighter days soon, but after victory, however long it takes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I would like to welcome Richard Ferrer, Judy Rodern, and Zvika Klein. They will be talking to justinacohen. Justine.
Thank you, everybody. And can I just say, first of all, that I have to reflect on something that Eylon said. 50 Jewish states. I'm wondering how many opinions might be found within those. That was quite a thing. I first of all would like to introduce Jody, who of course is the editor-in-chief at The Forward in America. Zvika Klein, who I'm delighted to say is joining us in his first public appearance as the interim editor-in-chief at the Jerusalem Post. So thank you for joining us so soon after coming to office. And Richard Ferrer, a fellow I know fairly well, my boss at the Jewish News. I just wanted to say, first of all, before we kick off, that this is a particularly poignant occasion for me. Exactly 1 year ago, almost to the moment, I was arriving at Heathrow Airport, bound for Ben Gurion, where I was to bury my father, who passed away a couple of days earlier. And to think about that journey and to think about what Israel has suffered since then, and the fact that he is buried in Jerusalem makes this an especially poignant occasion for me. I would like to split today's session, if I can, into three sections. First of all, talking about the role of Jewish media during this period. Second of all, going on to the issues of Israel diaspora affairs, a topic that Zvika is fairly familiar with, I understand. And finally, talking about issues around the region and the future of the region. If I can kick off by saying, as news editor of the Jewish News over the last 10 weeks and for many years before that, the difference between our newsroom and our output between the 6th of October and the 7th of October, those early hours of the morning on Shabbat, was massive. The changes that had to be made, the different elements that had to be put into place. Obviously, our viewers will have seen the huge output from all the outlets and many other Jewish papers around the world. But I'm wondering if you can reflect on those changes that you had to put in place. What didn't we see behind the scenes that led to you being able to respond to the crisis in the way that you have? And if Jody, if you can kick off with that.
Thanks, Justin. It's nice to be with you guys, with all of you. I guess I'm not sure I understand the question fully. I mean, when news happens, journalists respond, and we do everything that we can, and then we do more when it's the news that's this big. So we we immediately sent it turned out to be our opinion editor, but who played reporter for a few weeks, immediately to report from Israel, and the rest of the staff and all of our kind of freelance network just kind of went into overdrive to cover the crisis and its aftermath, and that has taken a lot of different shapes over the 10 weeks. I mean, there was one week where, as the campus crisis was heating up, we sent 11 reporters to 11 US campuses to get a clearer picture on what it was really like to be Jewish on campus. I myself just got back from 11 days reporting on the ground in Israel. We are spending money that we don't have to cover this war because we need to. And we've launched a special fundraising campaign to support it. But regardless of how that comes out, we're going to cover it in the way it needs to be covered. We've seen our audience, I think, double and triple around at different weeks, and the point not quite as the big growth that the Times of Israel has seen, becoming the fastest growing website in the world over the last 10 weeks. But we've posted a job for a full-time person based in Israel that I'm interviewing finalists for right now. And we've seen also our fundraising increase. The other thing that we did, we didn't do it behind the scenes, we did it out front, but we immediately took our paywall down for all coverage related to the war so that people would have universal access to our journalism. And we have since, we had a plan to do this, but we have since taken our paywall down fully and forever. We are now a membership-based, reader-supported, philanthropically supported nonprofit newsroom in the model of in America National Public Radio, where everybody can always read anything at the forward for free. So, we are just all doing everything that we can to cover the story in the fullest and fairest way possible. We also, one of our hallmarks is to have a broad opinion platform that includes all the different perspectives of the Jewish world. And so we've seen also a rush for people to contribute personal essays and opinion articles and experiences from Israel, from across the Jewish world. And we've been publishing, our output has something like doubled also in terms of the amount of articles that we publish each week.
Richard, one of the hallmarks of those first couple of weeks in particular for us was seeing Jewish news for the first time in history transformed into almost a national publication. And by that, I mean that we were being approached for comment on an hourly basis by the nationals. We were breaking a lot of stories. We were revealing, because we had those contacts, we were embedded in the community. Unfortunately, a lot of the initial deaths and hostages among British people. How would you answer that question? What do you think were the big changes that we put in place immediately to be able to cope?
Yeah, one of the first tragedies that we reported, of course, was Nathaniel Young, who was the first British victim who died with his unit on the 7th. As you know, we saw national and international media come to us to access the community, and we found ourselves helping and coordinate the national media, TV and radio and print, organizing events. We did the Bring Them Home balloon campaign across, 20 cities around the world. We cleared our pages for free advertising so that organizations that were supporting Israel at that time could publicize their good work. And yet, just like the forward, we're doing things we can't really afford, because I think we lost thousands of pounds of paper advertising in that first week as we tried to just do our bit to spread the word and leave a positive impact. The hardest thing for me, and you've been in these news meetings with me right the way through, has been to try and divorce my emotions. I've been a journalist for 30 years, and I was entirely unprepared emotionally for what happened. Those first few raw days were impossible, and that issue of that first week was the hardest thing that I think any of us have had to do. And the hardest thing of all was, I think, to disconnect from the anger and the trauma, because you're suffering the same trauma as the people you're interviewing. You're going through the same ordeal. Obviously, we're not in Israel. We're not on the coalface. But our colleague Yael probably won't mind me sharing this with you, but our colleague lost a brother in Gaza the week before last. We're having to console each other while reporting and while writing on what's happening, while doing a responsible job, providing crucial content, being a community service as much as being a community newspaper, and trying as best we can to hold the middle ground where people of good conscience can come together, feel comfortable, and try and control the urge to let our anger, fear, paranoia control the output. Because once we do that, I think we're starting to fail in our role. So I think that's really important, to use moderation and to be a place where people can coalesce. That I think was the most important, responsible thing for me, and I think hopefully you'll agree, Justin, our team.
Indeed. Svika, you of course are and were on the ground throughout this. I mean, you obviously you keep Shabbat. How did you first find out about what happened, and how did you respond personally and at the Post?
So it was Saturday morning, Simchat Torah, and my wife tells me in the morning, she's like, "I think you need to work." I was like, and we had, by the way, like 3 families over for a meal, and I realized I needed to work, and I, theoretically, like, I'm like, should I ask a rabbi? And I was like, you know what? People need to know. And we are a source of information from Israel. We have to operate. But many people that work for us keep Shabbat, and our defense reporter who covers the IDF keeps Shabbat. And unlike me, he would not work on Shabbat even in this type of situation, and I respect that. But then what do you do? And one of my kids, my 7-year-old boy, he said, I was in this room actually. He's like, Abba, when I'm in this room, I feel like it's Shabbat, and when I feel like it's not, it's the middle of the week, and when I'm outside, it's Shabbat. And it kind of was like that. I'll just say on a personal note, like most of my neighbors, like the men, are not home or haven't been home for weeks, for months, or coming back occasionally. So there's a situation where there's a bunch, like, we're talking about tens of thousands of single moms, something that is difficult because they may have to work, many of them are working and they have children, and there wasn't school at the beginning, right? So it's such a complicated situation. And do your editors work from home, or do they come in, right? Like, when do we start coming back into the office after threats of missiles, etc.? And one kind of challenge is, as an Israeli news outlet, first of all, the first 10 days of the war, we were targeted by the worst cyber attack that we've ever known. And the top minds at Google and other companies were working on it day and night to see how, because we kept on just collapsing. Obviously, the traffic has grown tremendously. But that definitely affects it. There's also a bunch of disinformation that pro-Palestinian groups are doing, using our name or reaching out, even to Eylon, who reached out to me. Someone from the UK with a UK number reached out to him to interview him for the Jerusalem Post, with broken Hebrew, a Google Translate type Hebrew. So it's a very weird situation. I'll just add one more thing is, there's so many stories to tell, but we can't, because there's 1,000, 300, 200, whatever people killed. Now, every one of us, and definitely an Israeli news outlet, will write about a person killed. But how do you write about so many in such a short time? How do you give attention to every single hostage family? So we're trying, always to be creative, and as you said, and part of our reporting staff is on reserve in the Army. So you have to be creative in getting, whether it philanthropic or I had volunteers at a certain point, like sit down, watch TV, and send me transcriptions and turning them into articles. It's being creative, but also, as you said, it's very personal because everyone has a personal connection.
Richard, if I can come to you for the next question, start off on the next question. We published a poll, of course, today suggesting that nearly 50% of people in the UK feel less safe, as a poll that we conducted with the Jewish Leadership Council. Can you give a flavour to a global audience as to the temperature of the community as it stands? And perhaps Jody can take the question afterwards about in terms of America.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer. And I've thought of nothing else and lived and breathed nothing else in the last 69 days. Look, the eyes and the hearts of British Jews are firmly on in Israel and Gaza, as they have been for the last 10 weeks. Eylon, now our previous speaker, he was in the Gaza envelope earlier this week, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said it's still October the 7th for Israel, a traumatized people that haven't moved on from that day. Well, here in the UK, it's very much December the 14th. It's very much 69 days later. The national agenda has moved on. The public mood has changed. Memories of what have happened have faded in the national conscience. So, it's been 10 weeks of British Jews thinking twice before they go to the centre of town on a Saturday, because there are some pro-Hamas supporters hijacking pro-Palestine events. 10 weeks of seeing kidnap posters being ripped down. 10 weeks of seeing a 1,500%, 4,000% rise in certain areas of anti-Semitism. But we knew things were going to move on. Absolutely, it was, and no man or woman of good conscience can see the horrific scenes in Gaza now and be expected to take an unemotional view of what's taking place, or to look at the thing from a 16-year perspective since 2006 and why it's now coming to this nightmarish conclusion. But for all those reasons, we did our first polling with a polling company called Survation. It was about 800 Jewish people in the UK we surveyed in November. 77% now say they feel less safe. And interestingly, institutions have also come under the microscope as far as the Jewish community is concerned. 64%, I think it is, now say that they trust the BBC, an organisation they pay a tax to, a subscription to every year, less than they did. So whether or not these feelings remain large and significant in weeks and months to come, as this ends, and it will end whenever that is, at some point next year, and the new status quo and the new reality takes hold, whether this is a lasting change that the Jewish community has to come to terms with, I don't know. I don't think it is. Because the cabinet, the shadow cabinet, the prime minister, the next prime minister, Keir Starmer, the king, they've all had the Jewish community's back, absolutely, and I feel reassured that the future can be indicated by the support of the current government and the future government, and not by the temperature on the streets, which I'm hoping will start to calm down eventually. And the Jewish community, and I always say this just to end, the thing that I've learned more in 14 years than anything else in my job is how it angers me that the Jewish community is forced to be defined by anti-Semitism. It doesn't define itself by anti-Semitism. It's anti-Semites that define it as such. And I want to get back to defining Jewish life in Britain by our contributions, and not by how bigoted people view us or wish to view us.
And Jody, I mean, no one who cares about Israel or the Jewish communities around the world will have avoided seeing those scenes in Congress just last week, the congressional hearings with the 3 university heads, and obviously the subsequent resignation of one of them. To what extent has that added to the feelings of general fears of American Jewry? And to what extent is life on campus symptomatic of a wider malaise?
Good questions. And, we have something like 7 million Jews in this country, and there's probably about 7 million answers, or maybe more than that. But I do think you have to distinguish between safety and comfort. And, the Jews in America and the Jews in the United States have for my lifetime, and certainly maybe even a little longer, have a very comfortable existence. We've been prosperous and successful, and have not been discriminated against systematically. We've been not, shut out of universities and jobs and clubs and residential neighborhoods. It's been a long time since that was true. And so I think what's been unfolding on American campuses and in some workplaces and in some neighborhoods since October 7th has been really uncomfortable. And that's really new for us. People have felt alienated and isolated and not quite sure, especially in the elite institutions and in the liberal coastal cities where people generally are very left wing and allied with the Black Lives Matter movement, where they're now seeing a lot of tension between their liberal Zionist values and the far left. But I think, and some people will articulate that as feeling unsafe. But most of the change that we've seen and the incidents that are recorded by like the ADL of increased anti-Semitism are really not, violent, and they're really not attacks. They're mostly about speech, hate speech, harassment, difficult images in social media, some marches in our streets. And so I think people are feeling quite uncomfortable, but I'm not sure that it really is about being unsafe. They may feel unsafe because they're so used to being comfortable. It is all very jarring, the kind of reshifting of the map. And you are seeing in a lot of the kind of middle and in the liberal Zionist spaces an upsurge of people looking to communities to connect. There's increased synagogue attendance and things like that are happening. And you can see Jews sort of gathering a little bit to build our sense of comfort up. I will say a couple of weeks ago, I was at the University of California in Los Angeles, and I did a panel with 3 students at the Hillel there. And one young woman, very articulate, talked about a feeling of unsafety on a day when she was literally like, she was trying to study for a test, and there was a Students for Justice in Palestine rally that sort of came right by where she was sitting. And she talked about feeling unsafe, and I kind of drilled into her a little bit about like, what do you mean by unsafe? And she really said, it was more unsettled than unsafe. So I think we want to be careful about, 1,200 people were killed for being Jewish on October 7th in Israel. They were unsafe from a terrorist threat. And that's not what we are experiencing on American campuses right now, even though it's really uncomfortable.
One of the things we also saw from the polling we did this week was quite a high percentage of people who were thinking maybe they don't have a future in the UK, that they were, starting to think about that, that old adage about, having their bags packed just in case. Just Jody, I wonder if you could quickly come in.
I mean,
that chat we're also hearing in America
a tiny bit, and we also heard it on November, whatever it was, 2016, when everybody was going to pack their bags after Trump got elected. And this is like a thing people say and not a thing people do. I am quite one thing we have seen. I think it'll be very interesting to see Aliyah patterns both ways, right? We have seen an uptick right after October 7th. I heard from several heads of Jewish day schools, and I think the JTA published a good article, which I'll share in the chat in a minute, about Israelis who left Israel and wanted to enroll in day schools. I think, how long those people will stay, whether they're going to make Yerida or they're going to go back to Israel soon, who knows? Whether people who were planning to make Aliyah this year will continue with their plans, will postpone them, will never go. That'll be a really interesting storyline to watch. I also heard something just last night at my own synagogue that I thought was interesting, which was the head of the religious school told me that 15 Israeli families had joined the synagogue and joined their religious school in the last couple of weeks, not people who had moved to the United States, people who were living in New Jersey, but not belonging to a synagogue and decided to join up or at least send their kids to religious school. She told me of one family who said to her, you know, my kid knows he's Israeli. I need him to know he's Jewish. And I thought that was interesting. I haven't seen a trend story about that yet, so we might assign one. But anyway, I think this question, I don't see people really. I do think people are saying like, oh, Bret Stephens has been banging this drum for a while now that, you know, we should be, that as anti-Semitism rises here, we should be conscious that our kids may need to live in Israel soon. I think it's a really great line for like an op-ed, and not really, you know, it takes a lot for people to change where they live. And we all know that Israel is a tough place to live. We're seeing that right now with 300,000 people called up for reserve duty. But, you know, long before that, finding an apartment you can afford is a whole nightmare. The cost of living is very difficult in a lot of ways. So I don't know anybody who literally has their bags packed. I do know people who are using that rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I totally get that. I think that we saw during the Corbyn era in the UK, again, this same conversation about what it would take to actually cause people to leave the country. And who knows what would have happened if he had got into power. However, you know, at the same time, clearly in Europe, certainly, parts of Europe, there is clearly a problem with extremists and with extremist Islamism. And, you know, we've seen many incidents over the years to realize that when they talk about threatening Jewish institutions, schools, synagogues, they have done that in places like Germany, in Belgium, and so on. I'm just wondering, Speaker, when you kind of look on as an Israeli, but someone who is so grounded in diaspora affairs, what are you hearing from Israelis who are looking on at what's going on in Europe? I mean, I've heard people say, you know, I've had people from Israel call me and ask if I'm feeling safe while they're going through what they're going through.
Right. So we're a nation that's get used to situations very quickly, you know. In 2015, when I did a video in France and with the kippah, and I received anti-Semitism, people were like, "Is it safe to go to France?" I was like, "Well, you live in Israel. Is it safe? I mean, is it safe to be in Israel? I don't know, you know." And then also then there was anti-Semitism in America. People are like, "Wait, can you find me someone?" You know, Israeli media like, "Find me someone that decided to not wear a kippah in America." I was like, "Well, you know." A few years ago, right? There aren't so many of it. Like, it's not a big phenomenon. I will add about Aliyah, what you said. I think it's interesting. You know, obviously, you know, I remember with, you know, Corbyn, and I think I even came to the Jewish news offices a few days before the election, and there was a feeling, you know, of British Jews possibly, whatever. And obviously he didn't win, but in 2023, you know, and when there's a war in Ukraine, you see, I mean, most Aliyah to Israel happens when things are really bad, when there's a war. And from Western countries, as Jody said, you don't just pick up your bags. In France, we've seen things like this happen a few years later, though, because people have to sell their house in Paris, and you can't buy a house in Tel Aviv at the same size if you're selling your house in Paris. So it's complicated. So I was very moved that, you know, we've been, you know, for 10 weeks, all the TV stations are like nonstop news, even though they're not news channels. And there's always like these photos in the background. And there was a certain point when I saw the pictures were also of Jewish communities, whether supporting Israel or suffering or under attack with anti-Semitic attacks. And that's when I felt that finally Israelis are starting to get it, that we really are one collective. And, you know, I'll add, you said, you know, about, you know, Israel diaspora relations. So, you know, unfortunately, it took a war for Jody to hire someone in Israel, right? It took, you know, and I'm trying to rehire someone in the US. But Israeli media in general in Hebrew isn't, you know, covering the diaspora. Now they are more. We're good at covering each other when things are bad. But one thing I think we should take from this is we should be learning about each other culturally, you know, not just the dirty, disgusting politics that every one of our countries has, but also when things are good. And that's not something that we're, you know, and obviously media focuses on the negative, but, you know, if you're telling a story constantly for a number of years, it clicks and people are able to understand it. So
on that topic, you read my mind, because I was going to then come to you with a question about Israel diaspora affairs. I was talking to a very wise fellow this week, I thought, who said that if anything comes out of this period, it has to be the clarity that Israel is strengthened by the diaspora, and without Israel, the Jewish communities around the world are significantly weakened. I think in the past, as you've hinted at there, the relationship has gone quite heavily in one direction, and a bit less so, maybe a lot less so, in the other. Do you feel that this period is a watershed moment in those relations? Do you think Israelis are now? I was speaking to Netta earlier on about the fact that a lot of Israelis have woken up to the concerns around antisemitism, which perhaps they thought had been overplayed by the diaspora before. Do you think there is a greater understanding, and do you think it will lead to closer relations in some way going forward?
There is a greater understanding, but I wouldn't overestimate it, because we are not even yet at a time of grieving, because we're not yet, you know, there. Yes, we see, you know, every single, you know, delegation of families of hostages goes to countries around the world, and the first stop or the people organizing it are the Jewish community. But, you know, kind of like COVID, I'm afraid that we're just going to go back, and then, you know, but I think Israelis changed, secular Israelis, which are very different than secular Jews in the US and in America, have become more Jewish. I haven't seen any surveys yet, but like you see these kibbutzim, super idealistic, like classic, as Jody said, you know, progressive Zionism, you know, singing Am Yisrael Chai and Shira Ma'alot and whatever when people are being free.
It's even more than that, Zvika. I mean, I met two different, so the wife of a hostage I interviewed recently, who totally secular or traditional family, says she's keeping Shabbat and lighting, you know, and I saw her like saying Tehillim. And the survivors that I interviewed from Kfar Aza, same deal.
Wow.
And I know it's true because I actually sent her a text that was during her Shabbat and she didn't answer it.
By the way, we're publishing that story in our print edition tomorrow.
Excellent. Oh, thank you. And also, I just edited a story about Israeli kind of hip designers and like leftists and secular Tel Avivis who are all like wearing Magen David, and some of their quotes are literally like, I was Israeli before, I'm Jewish now. So I think that's like definitely a phenomenon.
Right. So I wanted to add to that and to what you said about the Israelis in America. I mean, there's actually some sort of a paper coming out soon about that. Israelis in America always said, you know, or Israel, like, you know, emissaries of the Jewish agency who were secular said, I went out on shlichut. I was an Israeli. I came back as a Jew, right? Because unfortunately, in Israel, they didn't have that.
Well, they also see different ways of being Jewish here that are more accessible to them.
Exactly, so, right, exactly. And then,
I mean, if I had to put money on it, I don't think will last. I do not think all these secular people are going to like stay religious.
No, but it's not being religious; it's being Jewish.
Well,
that's
maybe,
what I'm saying.
Sure. But anyway, I think on the thing about, you know, how is this going to affect Israel diaspora relations? I mean, I just think there's like so many different axes of that, right? So you certainly see we've been seeing in polls for a long time that younger generations of American Jews are alienated from Israel, are anti-Israel, whatever. You are seeing obviously a much more virulent strain of that. And I think when I was in Israel, the Israeli left, Israeli Americans, American Israelis, sorry, are kind of horrified by what they're seeing there and really feel what is going on in America, what is going on with the left in America, etc. So there's one element of divide. At the same time, all Israel is like very happy with where Biden. I mean, I left before Biden started criticizing Netanyahu, but in general, the polls are showing incredible support for Washington and Biden. And I think that the non-anti-Zionist American Jew who has also been sort of like, yeah, Israel, whatever, is now very much more focused on Israel and connected to Israel. I feel like a lot of people in the sort of again, liberal Zionist, leftist, politically in U.S. politics, feel much very pulled to Israel right now.
But also, I would say Haredi Jews.
And
right?
Haredi Jews
rally,
in Israel.
You had Agudat Israel say, go out to the rally. Afterwards, they weren't so happy.
Yeah.
But it's a big deal.
So I think I just think it's like not so clear. Like it's not so clear,
Yeah.
Adalia Scheindlin had a very good piece. I think it was in Haaretz this morning, analyzing a lot of polls of American Jews that showed that, what's getting the headlines about, the Jewish Voice for Peace rally and anti-Zionism is really a fringe small group, and that the bulk of America, the mainstream America, middle America, is very supportive of Israel and of even how it's prosecuting the war. So we'll see.
Richard, in terms of British Jewry, historically, it's been the case that British Jewry has been closer, possibly because of the geography, to Israel. You've had much higher percentage of people, automatically visiting Israel at a young age and so on. But obviously, we saw in the last 10 months before the war and before the attacks that those relations were particularly strained by judicial reform. We covered that very, very heavily. Do you have hopes that this will set diaspora-Israel relations on a new path, or do you also think it's a short-lived phenomenon?
It would be a silver lining if that was one of the byproducts. Traditionally, it's very, very one-sided. Traditionally, it's we love you, you want us to make Aliyah. And that's really the line in the sand. EasyJet or Wizz Air suddenly do a service from Luton Airport to Tel Aviv. It's like this big, massive thing for the Jewish community in the UK, and it brings us even closer. Jewish schools, charities, UJIA. We live and we breathe to serve and support and celebrate. Do we celebrate Israel? Whereas the Aliyah minister in the Knesset tends to be the grumpiest man in the cabinet, or the grumpiest person in the cabinet every time. So it's very, very difficult to have that reciprocal relationship. But look, I think the last few months has blurred the distinction between Jews and Israel and the diaspora and Jews just generally, to the point where at the moment, I don't even feel it exists. I know there has been a clear definition between Jewish life in the UK, British Jewish life, and the identity that we have as British Jews, and how it's completely distinct from Jews in Israel. I've written about this in the past when Netanyahu a few years ago said, all Jews come make Aliyah. And I wrote a piece saying, no way I'm going to make Aliyah. I'm British. I'm not Israeli. I couldn't even think about doing that. Our columnist Josh Glancy wrote a very interesting piece for us last week. David Baddiel, who's a very proud Jew, he's just got the word Jew on his Twitter handle. He has absolutely no interest, or had no interest, in Israel. He was very derogatory and derisory about Israel. And Josh Glancy called it Baddiel's fence. He sat on Baddiel's fence and refused to come off of the fence. And now that fence has been well and truly obliterated by what happened 10 weeks ago, because October the 7th felt like an attack on every Jew. And it didn't matter if it was in Israel or London or Jerusalem or Manchester. It was an attack on every Jew around the world. So if that binds us together in some profound way, then yeah, maybe it is a silver lining.
We've only got 10 minutes left together, so I'm going to move on to the next section of the questions, if that's okay. As Eylon was asked about earlier on, Zipi Kotoveli, the UK ambassador, has made it very clear, if Netanyahu hadn't done before, that a two-state solution isn't part of the vision of, well, certainly her vision, and one would assume the vision of the Israeli government. And I think Eylon, at the moment, pretty much confirmed that, in light of the fact that neither Hamas or Fatah are perhaps ready as partners for a potential peace. I'm wondering, from your perspective, if we start with Speaker on that one, do you feel that that is a position that is born in just simple reality, that is just stating an obvious fact? Or, like Simon Sebag Montefiore said on Twitter earlier on today, is that simply a sign that no positive progress can be made towards a peaceful solution of any description whilst the Netanyahu government is still in place?
A two-state solution is not only not relevant in the Netanyahu government, it's not relevant in any potential future government that we can, whether Yair Lapid or Benny Gantz being the head. A two-state solution wouldn't have happened before October 7th, and even more so now. The Israeli left is shrinking. The center is growing at the moment in the surveys. Many on the left, Jody kind of touched on, I think, a little bit, feel betrayed by the international progressive community. And October 7th, the people kill again. I'm religious. I live in Efrat near Jerusalem. So I didn't personally know people from those kibbutzim who were killed. But the people who were killed, many of them were peace activists. Now, when you speak to them today, again, not all of them, but many of them, because they're speaking from emotion, and obviously they have all the right in the world to do so, want nothing to do with Gaza or with the Palestinians. You know, there's a really senior high-tech figure, I can't remember his name now, I'll remember in a second, and his daughter was killed at the Nova Festival. He actually invested, and he built offices or plants in Gaza because he believed that if they have an economy, then things will change. And now he says, I think he still believes in a Palestinian state, but he doesn't see anything moving forward in the next few years. This is not something, but what we lack are alternatives, because there aren't many alternatives.
Yeah, Jody.
Well, I was going to say Asma, so you have to, it's fine to say that people have given up on a two-state solution, people don't see a partner, and all of it is true. And we are living through I was going to say the worst, but I don't think it is the worst necessarily, of what happens when you don't address the conflict. So the status quo, October 7th was a horrible thing in so many ways. And one of the other things it was proof text of the status quo being unsustainable, and the ignoring of the Palestinian question being creating backlash. And so the fact that the Palestinian Authority is such a mess does not help the Jewish state survive, like sort of focusing on that. And I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that the real failure of the United States foreign policy towards the Middle East over the last 20 years is the way it has sort of allowed, it's not the United States' fault or problem to make the Palestinians have reasonable leadership, but to not have been working on that for the UN and the US and the EU and everybody who supposedly cares about the survival of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state and about Palestinian national sovereignty. for all of those entities, including American Jews, to not have been working on building up Palestinian alternatives that could be a good partner is a real shanda. And, this is one of the reasons that you see support for a two-state solution dropping on the Palestinian side, is because it's not their problem to solve, really. The conflict is a threat to Israel's survival as a Jewish and democratic state, and as we saw so tragically on October 7th, to Jewish lives. That's what's threatened by the ongoing conflict. So so the question again is Azma. So if not a two-state solution, then what? And whether it's, there was a pretty good piece in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, in the opinion section, with 10 different takes on what should happen with Gaza. And everybody should be thinking about it. I understand that Israelis, it's very difficult today with so many soldiers deployed, with funerals continuing, with people still being held in captivity. Totally very difficult to think about anything beyond ending the captivity, getting the hostages home, and ending the war. But it's not going to be okay to just say we can't do it. There's no solution. There's no two states. Then you're just right back where you were on October 6th. Maybe
can I just come back to speaker just a second?
Can I respond though? Because
I'm gonna ask you. Do you see an alternative? Because yes, the point that Jody makes is that, fine, no two-state solution. Let's say that's impossible at this point, but the Palestinians are still there. As far as it's not Israeli policy to wipe out all Palestinians. Absolutely, they're targeting as closely as they can Hamas operatives. So what is that alternative that you see at the moment? Because there has to be something. There has to be a day after the war. What happens when troops leave the Gaza Strip?
Well, first of all, as I said, there is no one solution that I have seen that I could say this is what I support. And there is a lack, and maybe we should be discussing it. But I just want to address what Jody said, and I think very highly of Jody. But we can't. It wasn't really blaming what you said, but leaving the Gaza Strip, as Richard said in 2005, and giving them autonomy to do whatever they want, without asking for anything in return, having people on the border volunteering in these kibbutzim to take them to hospitals because these children in Gaza were getting, cancer treatment, and then these people were killed, slaughtered, raped in the worst way possible. You cannot expect a country to want anything to do with that nation when you see Poles and the Palestinian Authority supporting Hamas. So
not wanting anything to do with
it
having a Palestinian state and ending the conflict is about separating. It's about separating. It's not about.
But when they have their own autonomy and they teach anti-Semitic content in their schools, that Jews, have big noses and are evil and may have horns on their head, just like the Nazis do, and they've been doing that, including in UNRWA schools. Nothing good is going to happen from that, and the geography isn't really, a way where we can just do that and just block off, a group of people. So I don't have a solution, but I am trying to reflect that a majority of Israelis, the Knesset just, the government voted against allowing Palestinians to return into Israel to work. And even though this is the most right-wing Israeli government, other governments may have also approved this type of decision because people don't feel safe. They don't feel safe, even if it's a female, woman cleaning an elementary school, who may be a really good person. A large group of Israelis just don't feel like they're at a place at the moment to allow such a thing to happen, which is terrible.
Speaker, so we're running out of time. We've got 2 more minutes. I would like to try and end on a positive note if we at all can. It seems we're probably not going to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on this particular conversation. Maybe the next one we can all return. If I'd like to ask for everyone's thoughts on an element of light. See, we're talking about Hanukkah here. An element of light in this crisis, as hard as it is to find. And if I may use my editor's privilege to start, and I think that despite the UAE certainly joining, the vote for a ceasefire last week, despite the UAE being one of the first countries to condemn Israel for what turned out to be the Islamic Jihad rocket attack on the hospital in Gaza, it feels to me, and from what I'm hearing and the positive noises I'm hearing and the positive contacts I'm still retaining within the Gulf states and particularly within the UAE, that the Abraham Accords are poised, and it will depend obviously on what happens with the Israeli government and what happens with the future of Gaza. But everyone wants the Abraham Accords to return to exactly where they were and perhaps to move forward at an even faster pace, as strange as that seems at this particular moment. It was someone quite high up within the UAE that was the first person to approach me about whether members of the Jewish News staff were getting extra security as a result of being on the media a lot in recent weeks, and that really encouraged me. I found that very heartening. Richard, seeing as I've forgotten you were here for the last few minutes, do you want to give us a thought on any light that you found in the last few weeks?
I was just composing my thoughts about Hotovelli, but you chose not to come to me on that one. So
unless you've got a solution, let's move on to the light bit.
Bright spots.
Hotovelli.
It was mentioned about synagogue attendances going up. I think certainly there's a sense of communality and the community feeling that it needs to kind of be together at this time. I hope that sticks. Certainly after COVID and we were separated for so long. It was heartening to be amongst 100,000 people at the largest ever rally against anti-Semitism since Cable Street in 1936, a couple of weeks ago. There was about a third of the entire Jewish community of the UK all in one place, which was quite lovely. The sales of Magen David's, mezuzahs are soaring. And like you, I'm having conversations and I'm getting a sense of reassurance that the Abraham Accords are holding firm, that the states that had signed and that were poised to sign, particularly Saudi Arabia, is holding firm, and that a wider regional peace accord could potentially be something that happens within a year or two of things calming down within Gaza. So that does give me hope for a positive future both in the region and for Jewish life in general.
Jody, same question.
Yeah. Let's see. I think one thing first of all, readership of Jewish news organizations is up. That's a good thing.
Certainly.
The other thing is that one of the things I found in Israel, I'm sure Zvika is experiencing this. This is mostly like just among my friends from when I lived there. But there's this, in addition to all the Americans and probably Brits who are going over there to pick persimmons or whatever, a lot of Israelis are kind of like once a week going out on the farms and working on the kibbutz farms. And I think there's something, and I mean, really in general, all the volunteer stuff that is popping up in the organic way it's popping up is sort of incredible. These soldiers who are not in Gaza are clearly the best fed army in the history of the world, with all the like homemade food being sent down there.
And chefs also.
Yeah, but I think what I meant though is like, I think the kibbutzim in Otef Gaza and the Gaza envelope were like this weird like part of Israel that nobody really understood, and I feel like there's like an interesting way in which people from the center are being connected to the people from the South, and that there's some interesting points of light there. And I will also just share a personal one, which I'm going to share in my newsletter tomorrow. But so I wrote this really quite harrowing story about a family, a young couple who spent 27 hours locked in their mamad at Kfar Aza with a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old under intense Hamas fire. Both Hamas and the IDF thought they were not there because there were 2 safe rooms in their house. And so they were really like abandoned, and it was quite an ordeal. And the woman, the mom, told me the story in incredible detail. So I wrote a very long story with a lot of detail, which I will again share in the chat in a minute. Anyway, one of the little details was that when they first got in there to keep the 3-year-old quiet, they gave him a tablet, and he watched his favorite YouTube show, which is called Coco Melon. And their main character on the show is a little baby named JJ, or a little kid named JJ. Anyway, JJ's parents read the foreword, and they asked JJ, who's actually a child named Cody, an 11-year-old named Cody, and he recorded a WhatsApp message, an audio message for baby Adam, 3-year-old Adam from Kfar Aza, and sent it to him. And we talk a lot about impact of journalism, and we try to like change laws or get people fired. And I don't know, I felt pretty good about JJ making an audio recording for Adam. And so that felt like that's a point of light that I'm holding on to personally.
Thank you. Speaker, I have every respect for your new role and your title, but I'm going to give you 1 minute. Because otherwise I'm worried that you're going to fall asleep, and Itai from Eretz Nehederet that we're about to hear from is also going to fall asleep, seeing as it's approaching midnight over there.
Right. Very quickly. As Jody said, the volunteering is just overwhelming. I mean, I could just tell you, as I said, on my street, I wrote a column about the fact that like there are no fathers on the street. So when the kids need someone to pump up the bikes, they come to me. And I'm not a really technical person, but I know how to pump, the tires of a bike. And we, my wife, we both work very hard, and we have guests almost every single day because of all these single moms. And it's a real issue. Like, it's not been discussed enough, but these families in a very difficult situation. High schools going to pick oranges, not just, adults. I think the Haredi community is going through a tremendous change, something that may have had to take years. I think the liberal left is going through interesting issues. And also the Israeli right kind of understood that this government that they voted for was not as many things that they thought it was. I'm just hoping we can continue this, and that's it. That's my minute.
Speaker, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. And I think Eylon may have been confused by just seeing our logo at the top of the screen in his session, but I just want to say a huge thanks to both the Jerusalem Post and to the Forward for joining us in this endeavor. I think possibly the largest global event that we've seen since the start of the war, bringing together people in 4 different time zones, including Netta in Germany. And on that note, thank you very much. I'll hand back to Netta, who's been incredible in the last couple of days. You're on mute.
I didn't want you to hear me. Okay, so for the past 20 years, Eretz Nehederet has been Israel's leading comedy and satire show. And in the past weeks, the show went on air on a special war mode, tackling not only the usual targets, such as politicians, Netanyahu and his cabinet, but also the anti-Israeli sentiment abroad, including the far-left progressive woke movement on campus and social media. Itai Reiche is one of the show's writers. Hi, Itai.
Hi, Netta.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, we won't try to do a British accent. No. So wait, I want to see you. Oh, here you are. Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm drunk.
Oh, good. That's good. So I think that the most interesting question would be to ask you, how is it like to write satire during wartime?
Strangely, it's easier than writing during peacetime because you know what you're going to write about. It's not like you go to work in the morning and you look for a topic to write about. You know it's going to be about the war. The only question is when to start writing, actually. Because the first week or so, we thought nothing's ever going to be funny again. It was really harrowing days and shocking times. And you know, it's kind of like having sex when you're married for a long time. When you have to convince yourself to start doing it, and then you get used to it again, and you start having fun again. The whole thing was very. It felt unnatural to be funny after October 7th, and we felt guilty about trying to be funny after October 7th, and it felt completely alien to anything else on television and on the street and in our families, in our lives. And then we started seeing soldiers doing funny stuff online.
It was the Yiddish-speaking soldier, probably.
Yeah, and the soldiers trying to, asking people to send them Xbox and ping pong tables, and just taking advantage of the situation. And we're like, oh, if the soldiers were risking their lives and literally in the worst possible circumstances right now are having laughs, so we kind of got the permission from them to start trying to be funny again. And so we went on air really quickly, like 19 days after October the 7th, we had our first show. It was very weird, and it was very wasn't that funny, but it was the first thing that aired in Israel that was not used in almost 3 weeks. So it was a powerful moment for many people. And I must say, at first we felt guilty about being funny, and now we kind of feel guilty about being very successful at it on a global scale.
Yeah, you started writing in English.
Yeah.
That's the first time actually that you do it.
Yeah, we're very hardcore Israelis, we're in our culture, in our language. We contribute to our language. We live here. We always shunned from writing in English, even when we had English speaking characters, we always found an excuse to make them in Hebrew. But then I think the BBC incident made us so furious that we knew that we had gonna have to write something about it, and obviously it had to be in English. And we were surprised by the impact that it had, not only amongst Jewish people, but amongst many English people felt the same way about the BBC. Of course.
Do you think it's effective at all in swaying public's opinion, or is it just to strengthen the support among the supporters?
It's a good question, Etta. I don't think, and I've been writing satire for 17 years in Israel, and I became very humble in my beliefs, in the way does it change anything? I don't think anybody changes their opinion because of a sketch or because of a joke that they heard. The main effect of comedy is it makes us feel better about our opinion. It makes it pays our salary. But the things that really change people's opinions is reality. And we have 1,200 people killed. You change your mind when you see a funny sketch. Not so much, but still, it has an effect of uniting people around the same opinion. Because many people felt betrayed and that they were being judged harshly by the BBC, and I'm being very cautious without using the A word.
A word.
Yeah, and so when we wrote the first sketch against the BBC, and the impact that we received, many people felt the same way, and were very angered by the BBC. And and we wrote a couple of more sketches about of course, the progressive work movement in America, which really disappointed many people on the left in Israel, including myself, by the way. I never thought it would be that bad. I mean, I always knew they were naive and idiotic and fashion victims, but I never ever believed that they would be as shallow and as superficial as they are. And we did another sketch about them, about the anti-Semitic. It was like called, I think we named it Colombia antisemitism, and it was very powerful as well. And so yes, we had some global reach to these sketches, and it was, I wouldn't use the word fun, but it was I don't know, it was fulfilling.
Maybe it's easier to write about things that happen abroad rather than things that happen in Israel. It's easier to shoot about it.
It was certainly a refuge. It was certainly something that took our minds off of. It's easier to make fun of woke students in America than to think about another family or another reserve soldier with family at home, fighting for his life and for your life in Gaza. So definitely, you're right about that. And in the first couple of weeks, we tried to stay away from Israeli politics. We tried to find things that are that bring people. I wouldn't say that bring people together, but we try to be not as divisive as we usually are. We try to be to tell our viewers we feel like what you feel. We understand what you're going through. We go through the same thing. What makes you angry makes us angry. Let's make fun of the people who are against all of us as a group, the largest group possible, which is Jews, Israelis, liberals, whatever. It's changing really quickly, by the way.
Last week, we also the presidents of Harvard, Penn, and MIT universities giving truly shocking answers at a congressional hearing. Could you please tell me about how you tackled this subject in your show and about the guest appearance that you had? Yeah.
Well, first we all of us heard it on the same time. The hearings, we were shocked. We thought like one of our writers actually wrote it for us. We thought we couldn't top it. It was so ridiculous, and so we immediately had this idea for a sketch that we had this idea for many years about doing. It's a dream of ours. Every Purim, I'm getting to Jewish people so they know what I'm talking about. Every Purim, we always have this dream of doing a Harry Potter sketch, and then we never do it. And then this happened, and we're like, let's do our Harry Potter sketch because we love Harry Potter, and we're gonna do it. A hearing at Hogwarts about killing mudbloods and calling for their genocide. And we wrote the sketch, and of course, we knew Michael Rappaport was very on our side on this issue. He was very loud about his hatred for the American left and for everything. And then we contacted him, and he was the most incredible person we've met, and he just took a plane, came to Israel, and he participated on our show. It was such a tremendous experience, and he was Dumbledore. But I want to talk about something. Everybody is disappointed at what they know best. Academics were disappointed by MIT and by University of Pennsylvania and by Harvard. Me as a comedy writer, 2 days before we shot our show, we were at work and someone said, "Hey, SNL did a sketch about these hearings," and we were like, "Oh shit, this would probably make our script redundant." And we were like, "Let's see what their take on the issue was," and we played their sketch, and we were like this, we're like, SNL are doing a sketch about this really ridiculous hearings, and what they chose as their target for comedy was not the university presidents, but the Republican congresswoman, of course, who questioned them. And we felt, first of all, that it was not funny, and second of all, that they lost their moral compass on so many levels, and we were so disappointed at them. And then, of course, we were also kind of happy because we knew that our sketch still has holes, and we don't have to rewrite it because they didn't do even remotely what we were doing. But we had Michael Rappaport come to our studio, and I gave him the script, and we worked on the script together. And the first thing he asked was, "Are you allowed to say fucking on national TV here?" And I said, "Yeah, you can do whatever. You can." And he said, "How many times am I allowed to say fucking?" And I said, I think normally once, but because you're a major Hollywood star, you get to do it like twice or even 3 times. And he was very excited. And the sketch is on YouTube for all of you to see if you want to. It's called I think it's called Hogwarts Hearing, Hogwarts whatever. It's a really nice sketch. It's quite viral. It was a fun experience.
And the most viral one is the song. How should I call it? A song? I don't know how to call it. It's the song of Hamas leaders that.
Yeah, the Hamas leader song.
Yeah.
Do you want to see it? Do you want to watch it?
Yeah, I want to see it.
Let's have some fun, because it was such a heavy conversation before about Judaism. Let's just have some fun. Play it.
The children of Gaza are suffering. They have no food or medical supply. But you can help. Please open your heart and make a donation by clicking in the link below. Shukran and God bless you.
What we are brought on Gaza. Thank Allah that we are safe in the plaza. There's nothing left to eat like a Ramadan retreat. I don't really give a shit, cause I'm hanging in my sweet. Check out, we are dealing here with monsters. The room service wouldn't bring us lobsters. Call Maya Khalifa to play with us some FIFA, and tell her to dress up like she is a nursing shifa. Dollar bills. My people have no water, wonder how it feels. Dollar bills. They have no gasoline, I just order menu wheels. Donate us money, my dog needs new Armani. Gaza sky is black, but Qatar is always sunny. Knocking on the door, fuck it's the Mossad. Chill ya baba, I just ordered sushi avocado. Dollar bills. Mash'Allah is so straight, he just got himself new grills. Dollar bills. Put some Netflix on, I don't want to see the kills. Donate us money, my dog needs new Armani. Gaza sky is black, but Qatar is always sunny. You just give me money, life is pretty funny. Gaza sky is black, but Qatar is always sunny.
Cry harder.
We need more money.
People of the world.
So that's of course Lisa's song, Dollar Bills. So this happened. This was actually ready 3 weeks ago. This video. We wanted to air it. I think 3 Wednesdays ago, and we were just about to play it, and then the hostage deal kind of what's the word? Materialized.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of self-censored ourselves saying it's not the right time to piss off Hamas leaders when they're about to release our hostages, even though we don't think we would have had any effect on the issue, but we knew people would say that we might have had. So we shelved it for until the hostage deal was carried out, and then we heard it this Wednesday. It has like 20 million views. We're very I don't know, proud is not the word, but yeah, proud. I spent today translating this song to Arabic, hoping it might.
Sorry, you translated to Arabic? I didn't hear you well.
Yes, we tried to.
Okay.
Not by myself. My Arabic is horrible, but I can read and write, but not really well. So we did a version in Arabic with Arabic subtitles, hoping it would have some kind of effect in the Arab world as well. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's something that it's strong. It's a really strong point we want to make as writers and as people as well. We're not against Palestinian people or against Arab people in general. We know we have many Arabs in Israel. Arabic language is not the enemy. You can be pro-Arab and pro-Palestinian and against Hamas. And, I don't want to be so heavy on Hanukkah, on 8th candle, but we're living in a huge tragedy in this region. And this tragedy is I think the leaders are horrible on both sides. And I think this song is fun to listen to, and it's a pop song, but underneath I think the message is really tragic. The Palestinian people are captives of the worst leadership that you can possibly imagine, and if we can get this message across even to some of them, it would be more than we ever hoped for as writers and as people, I think.
Let's hope so. Okay, Ty, thank you very much.
That's it?
Tonight. Yeah, that's it. It was pretty short.
It was short.
That's fun. That's
it. Was fun, though.
Yeah, but stay for the candle lighting.
Yeah, of course I will.
Okay.
Thank you, Neta.
Thank you, Itai. So now for the special moment we've all been waiting for, I would like to invite Rabbi Albi Chait, MBA Senior Rabbi of the UHC, leads one of the UK largest shuls, to lead the candle lighting.
Thank you, Neta. Thank you so much. And Itai, you said this was a great tragedy for the Jewish people, for Israeli people, for all people in the world. And you're absolutely right. And as we light the final candles on the final night of Chanukah, let's pray that the light of the Chanukah should bring all of us a sense of peace and comfort at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, wherever you're watching from, please get together with your Chanukah as we light together on this final evening of Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lecha niknei Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim l'avoteinu bayamim ha'em ba'azman הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים, על הניסים ועל התשועות ועל הנפלאות ועל המלחמות שעשית לאבותינו, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בזמן הזה. מעוצו ישועתי, אל שבח, תיכון בית תפילתי, ושם תודה נזבח, ויהי תכין מטבח, מצער נבח, אז כמו בשיר מזמור, חנוכת המזבח, אז כמו בשיר מזמור, חנוכת המזבח. חנוכה שמח.